Hey friends, Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 49, Kevin McCarty. All right, I'm going to be completely honest with you, so real right now. There are 4 reasons why your hooks are killing the song. These are 4 reasons that I see over and over and over again when I have people come to me for consultations, when I sit down with my Riff to Radio students. These are the 4 reasons that most things are not an ear candy hook that are pulling the listener in, but it's driving them away. Now, you don't want that, do you? Of course you don't. So here's what you got to do. Go to songwritingforguitar.com and sign up for my free training right now. 4 reasons why your hooks are killing the song. Once you know the 4 reasons, you'll know not to make them, and you'll actually enhance your songs and start pulling those listeners in. So remember, all you got to do, songwritingforguitar.com and sign up for my free training series, 4 reasons why your hooks are killing the song right now. Now, on this episode, I sit down with Kevin McCarty, who is the co-founder of the app We Should Write Sometime. Think of like Tinder or Bumble or a dating app, but for songwriters. It's a great way for songwriters to connect with each other, start to expand your songwriting circle, and find that perfect co-writer that you've been looking for. Now, we're going to talk with Kevin on the history of how this app was created and the benefits of how you can use this. And especially after the 2 years we've had in 2020 and 2021, songwriters had to be inventive and find new ways to network, and this app is perfect for it. So we're going to get into all of that. So let's dive into episode number 49, Kevin McCarty. Kevin, what's up? Thank you for being here.
Man. Thanks for having me. This is great. It's good to talk to you again.
Dude, I'm pumped because I feel what you've created is something I see out of necessity too. You know, being someone who grew up and who started to think like, I want to write professionally, but lived in a place where, frankly, it's not like you can just go down the street. We don't have like a music row where we just be like, oh, everybody congregates here. And it's like, our scene was incredibly metal. So it's like, I knew like, okay, that's probably not going to be my thing. The idea that there's a platform where everyone can go. Start to look for creative people and people that are going to match. I want to get into that, but what's created that idea, sparked that idea? Were you always creating stuff too? Just like starting to like put like, there's a need, I should create something.
Yeah. I was fortunate, just some of my backstory of being in bigger organizations that were starting new things. And I'd always played music, and I was in like a band through college, and, we did fun cover songs. So if anybody that's been to Broadway in Nashville, it's like I was in one of those bands, right? All through, and it was super fun, had a blast, but I knew it, like, I wasn't going to make a career out of playing music, didn't have the greatest voice, and just, I was good enough at guitar, but my other passion in the business and tech and space. And I was like, eventually I want to figure out a way to make the two kind of collaborate, bring in the music and then bring in the business and tech side. And fortunately, when I graduated college, I went to a couple bigger organizations that were starting new departments and new divisions. And so I kind of got to see, fresh into the business world, something starting from scratch, but just under the umbrella of a bigger company. So call it like a intrapreneurship, if you will. And then I went to a education technology company, and they had me kind of start this brand new division, under my leadership. So I kind of like was a part of it in one big company, and then got to kind of do my own thing, and had to develop the marketing and develop the strategy and the sales process and all that stuff. And so, I looking back, just started realizing, to your question, like I enjoy the whole, like having like the origins of something and then building it to a place at scale. And again, for our app, we still have so much farther to go, and are really excited at what the future holds for us, but have a ton of work to do. But I loved the idea of just kind of like being a part of something from the beginning, and then like working at it from all angles and seeing it grow, and having kind of goals and how do we get to certain benchmarks or KPIs or whatever you want to call them throughout the business part of it. And so fortunately, my experience helped in this situation of going, look, we see a need in helping songwriters. And there's a pain point of trying to find, even in Nashville, like you can find a songwriter anywhere. Just walk down the street, go out at night, you can find them. but the challenge is finding the right one. Like, which one are you looking for, and which one fills the gaps that you have as a songwriter, whether it's I do melody, you do lyrics, we need someone to do the track, we need someone to fill an X gap for this genre, whatever it is. It was just kind of one of those, being around the industry as much as I could kind of highlighted that pain point, but then it really just blew up of like, oh my gosh, this is an idea, when my co-founder came to me and had this idea because he needed to find songwriters to be a part of his nonprofit, which is kind of a whole nother story. But it was just fortunate for me, my history, but then fortunate for timing when my co-founder came to me and was like, dude, I think you're my guy for this. You love music, you love tech. This is what you want to do. And I was like, yeah. And it just made perfect sense. So I'll stop there for a sec because I know it's a million.
No, dude, that's a great answer, because I think that, when you're going to build something, your experience of being in other people's fields, other worlds, and then being like, okay, help me create the thing, and helping bring to life someone else's other idea, someone else's venture. It gives you insight to the tools. Yeah. But then that's also a turning point for some where they go, cool, I always want to be someone that just helps other people realize the thing that they want to build. And then there's an other point where others go, you know what, actually, I think I want to build something. Now that I've done this, if it's just as much risk and it's just as much thing that I have to do to build for someone else, why not take that on, why not for me?
Yeah. And there was a big part in there that I didn't really touch on, which was when I came to Nashville 6 years ago and I was working remotely for my real full-time tech sales job. I had an opportunity within the music tech space for kind of it was a company based out of Brazil, but they didn't have any footprint in Nashville or the US. And so they kind of told a buddy of mine and me, said, hey, if you can, get this up and going, this is yours. Like, we'll give you guys the Nashville or United States to run it. And it was a really cool platform, and it still exists, but it just never existed in the US. And I never understood why. And as soon as I dug in and really started trying to, as a side hustle, learn how to implement this in the music space. And really what it was trying to basically crowdsource shows for musicians using fan data from social media. And so this was, again, 6 years ago. And there's a couple platforms now that do this. But, when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to change touring. And I'm going to be a billionaire by, 35 and end of it. Right. And was really excited about it. And then, after 8 months working on it really hard with my friend, and we made $0 and made very little to no progress. And I was just like, what's going on with this? And what I had learned was really important in starting this venture was how to implement things in a small way to the music industry that typically has been rather slow to adopt new technologies, if you will, for various reasons. But I think one thing that I realized was, how do we help provide tools and resources to the music industry that don't have a lot of hands in the pot, if you will? It's like, having people, whether control its social media posts, touring, scheduling, booking, what does that look like for an artist or musician? What we do is very direct. It's songwriter to songwriter. And typically there's not a whole lot of people controlling who you're setting up co-writes with, unless you have a publisher or a label and they're setting up the co-writes for you. But most of our users and most of the songwriters are just saying, hey, I just want to write with other people. And if I'm not in Nashville, how do I do that? And that was very easy for us to implement the geolocation feature and say, hey, if I'm in Pennsylvania, I just want to change my location to find people in Nashville and try to make that as easy as possible.
Well, it feels like you did hit on a pain point, and I'm really interested how you worded, we did this experience. We worked for 8 months in this thing, didn't make a dollar, but it gave me information for the thing. Yeah. It's like, there are people where, again, there's another like pivot where either some people are like, I failed. Well, this is it. Bye. Yeah. And they just stop. And there are others are like, oh, that's interesting. It didn't work out. Well, why didn't it work out?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I could probably use this information. And again, there's another chunk of people that would be like, oh, this is interesting. They kind of lean into the problem more, and they're like, well, why didn't it?
Yeah.
I should use this.
And I think, again, I'll always go back and be very grateful for the people that I kind of surrounded myself with that had these openings and things for me that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet if I just wasn't around these people. And I just said, look, like, I want to go down there and be a part of the music industry and the tech industry. So I have nothing to lose here, and some people be like, well, you spent 8 months on something that didn't, get you any financial reward. But I learned, I think, more in 8 months than, I don't have any metrics of this, but most probably in 5 years working in the industry, because I'm trying to start something, not necessarily from scratch, but start something from scratch in the US and get it in front of musicians and artists and labels and anybody that's involved, and just seeing, I guess, friction points or pain points that each of these roles have within music. And that learning lesson was worth, I can't put a dollar amount on it, but I think it was time, but it was also a good use of time. And look, like, I love music and I love being social. So there was a lot of, having fun and going to writers' rounds and enjoying my nights. And it was a blast, but that was all part of what I knew I wanted to be a part of and what I wanted to be doing.
And I feel what you've created too, again, it goes to a very specific need. It's not a general, just like, oh, here's like some music information. But when you talk co-writing, co-writing is is the best way to enhance your skills quickly, because what better way than connecting with others, learning from others, taking their process, then making it, combining it with yours to create a solution. That's where great co-writing partnerships are created.
Right.
That's where, again, skills that maybe from where you're at right now, you don't have a great lyricist, you don't have a great track person, but you can now start to build that connection. That's a game changer for people. They can no longer say like, well, I live here.
Yeah.
There's now something that's actually showing, well, take a look who's around you.
I love that. And I know that you've been doing this a long time. So you get it, where it's one of those where, statistically, I think it was like since 2010, like less than 4% of number ones or top 100 hits have been written by one songwriter. So it's really hard to do all of the things to create a song from scratch by yourself. So it's, you need essentially a team, right? Think of a basketball team of, you need a point guard, you need forwards and a center and a coach. And so you need all these people that are working together to achieve one goal. And, when you have more writers in the song, there's more people then have vested interest to see it succeed and see it grow and see it get out there. And, so there's a whole business side of songwriting that I think is a lot of education needs to go into that. But at the core of it, it's, man, I know I have strengths and I know I have weaknesses. So how do I get somebody in the room with me that has the strengths where I'm weak and vice versa, to write the best song possible? And with technology, there's kind of that motivational part for me of music's a very who do you know network industry. But part of my deep core reason for trying for doing a lot of this is saying, like, no matter where you are, if you're good enough and work hard enough and write good enough songs, we can help you be successful. No guarantees, but I'm a big sports guy. And I think a lot of it, like the minor leagues to the major leagues, like how do we create this ecosystem within this platform to, no matter where you are, if you really do work hard enough, write good enough songs, we can help you go from single A to double A to triple A and eventually the major leagues. I think there's a way for us to do that. Again, long way to go with it, but I think it's providing coaches like yourself and education and things that we know songwriters need and want. And it's delivering it in a way that facilitates it to where they need it and when they need it. Still trying to figure all that stuff out, but I think that's where the beauty of music is going. Look, it all starts with the songwriter, and you got to write a song, but you need songwriters to write that song. And so how do you put the 2 people in a room, 3 people and 4? We're building out a way to add 3 or 4 up to 5 people in a message, but that's coming soon. But you need those other people to help the song get out there and succeed.
You do. You need people. And this also just eliminates, I feel like, an argument to people when they go, well, I guess I can't do it because I don't live. It's like, well, that argument doesn't work. Because, it is work. You can't, it's not a guarantee, like, you're going to write a hit song. But it's just like, if you're willing to show up, put in the work, and start searching, you can find those people. You can find 100%. That core group of songwriters that work for you. Yeah, so you're eliminating that argument
Yeah.
of, that you don't have to be in a music city. And then if you're willing to put in the work and show up and start
Yeah.
searching, because regardless, even if you are in a music city, you still have to put in the work and
Yeah.
you still have to, it's just almost sometimes you're eliminating that excuse of
Right.
like, oh, I've got to live in a music city to find people. That's the only way you can write good songs. It's like
Right.
the internet. Do you know
Yes.
this thing called the internet?
And I think there's still an argument like to succeed, and like make a big long career. I think it's too early to tell, right? Like just that's where the industry is, if you will. But to get discovered, to write good songs, to put it out there, to get a following and grow a fan base and put out good stuff, you can do that anywhere, and get discovered. I want it to be just like they do, again, going back to the baseball analogy. Like if you're a great baseball player coming up and scouts are going to find you and then they'll bring you to a major league team, right? It's so how do we kind of build that infrastructure within music for songwriters specifically is exciting for us, because I think when I look at some of the profiles and listen to the songs, it's like, man, they are so good, right? And I think the right guidance and the right connections and right music to put out and A&R and development and doing all that good stuff. Like there's some real talent there. And that's exciting. And I think hopefully gives that boost to scale across the globe. And you're starting to connect with, we're in Israel, right? If you get a track guy or girl in Israel, hooking up with a top liner in LA and just, getting a melody from Nashville. And you're like, what kind of music and are we going to be listening to in 3 or 5 years? It's just like, man, it's exciting stuff.
But it's interesting because as music changes, because it does, and the industry changes, and it seems like you're getting ahead of where it is going to eventually go. Because I think definitely in 2020, people kind of hit the panic button of like, oh, how do I do rights now? I only know in-person rights. I only know this form. This is how am I going to do this?
Right.
But it seems like, no, if you're adapted to this form and you're using it to your advantage, there is no panic button. There's no gotta figure it out.
And here's one of the things that I learned through, all of quarantine of 2020, right? And at first it's like, man, like I don't like doing in-person or virtual writes, or you don't get the same feel. And I think there's always going to be that sense of it's just better to write in person, just as like a feel part of it, and just kind of like can, kind of read the room and build off of each other. But there's the other flip side to that, where I've had a handful of people get on the app and reach out and just be like, hey, one of the biggest things I've ever wanted to do in my career is write with people from Nashville. And I'm in a small town in West Texas, right? And I was able to actually start doing that, even though they could essentially do it before, but the availability and comfortability and everybody being open to doing it, because they kind of were forced to do it, has then eased that whole thing of going, actually, this is more efficient, right? Like I can find the best and right people, and I don't have to worry about traffic, and I don't have to worry about like, this, that, and the other. And we can just go on real quick. And there's plenty of tools, plenty of resources and technology to write a great song virtually. And something I never even thought of until I had a couple people mention it to me is they say, I'm not an extrovert, and meeting people and walking up and saying, hey, we should write sometime like that's uncomfortable to me. But if I meet somebody in the app and I'm able to do the virtual thing, I actually feel like I can open up more and be a little bit more vulnerable because I'm not in the room with them. And I thought that was an interesting thing that I wasn't expecting, because, you always just think like, hey, we can sit in a room and bounce ideas off of each other. And I had a couple of people just say like, I just feel better virtually because I'm more of an introvert, and like meeting new people in person makes me nervous. And I was like, gosh, man, I didn't even think of that.
I feel too, it is more efficient. Like there's something about online where, if you're in person, there's a lot of the conversation just like, okay, how's it going?
Yeah.
Something about online feels like, hey,
sure,
your time's valuable, my time's valuable.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Cool. Let's talk and let's see. And I love that idea that you can have this conversation going into the write too.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be like, hey, what are we going to write? You can hear all of that on that front end, even before you book day. You
Yeah.
take care of that.
Sure.
Where a lot of people jump into a write and they're like, hey man, what do you
Yeah.
want to write? It just seems like, no,
Yeah.
you can take care and make it way more streamlined and efficient.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea, and why, you know, we modeled the functionality a lot like dating apps, is it made a lot of sense to be able to kind of vet people essentially like you do on a dating app, see the likes, dislikes, a little bit more about them, able to look at their socials and are they a real person or not. You know, with this, it just kind of made sense. You know, you can listen to their songs and see what the skills they have. They put in their influences and, you know, who their idols are and whatever. So you get a good sense of who that guy or girl is going into the right. And then you're like, man, like now I'm not questioning, like, you know, what do you do? How do you sound like? And what is kind of the feel going to be? You have a much better sense of what, you know, to go into the right with. And then the big part is like that just saves a lot of time, right? And how many times do you meet people and, hey, we should write time, and then you schedule a write. That takes time. Then you get to the right, and then you get in the room and you're like, this just isn't even remotely close to what I was looking for. And then you just wasted 2, 3, 4 hours, you know? And so how do you cut that time down? And I think in the macro with that efficiency stuff too, right? It's that's one small example, but that across the music industry, if you will, I guess songwriting industry, like how do you cut down on inefficiencies? And then it's, you know, to get demos done, to get it, you know, record, whatever those steps are of the songwriting process. I think a lot about how we can implement that stuff, education being a huge one of it. How do you educate people on the songwriting world, on how to be a better songwriter, like you're doing so well in the guitar world, but then also the business side of songwriting. And so how do you implement those things? So, you know, they always have that cliche of Nashville's a 10-year town. And, you know, I think I look at it in terms of where are the inefficiencies and how do we make it a 4 or 5-year town? You know, like how do we cut that in half? And again, like I always want to make it so we're not promising anything. And I will always do this because I think it makes a bunch of sense. It's most kids play baseball, t-ball, high school ball, whatever, like, but very, very few that want to make it to the majors actually make it. And I think it's somewhat of the same feel of like, hey, we're not promising you're all going to be, we're going to pay us whatever, and we don't charge anything. But like at some point, we want to make it so we give you structure and a pathway and a system, if you will. But you got to be really good and you got to work really hard. And we're not sure how exactly that's going to happen just yet, but that's kind of what we see to support songwriters, right? It's to give them the right tools and resources that they need and they want, but it's whether or not they're willing to put in the work almost, because it's one of those, like I've had a couple people reach out and be like, hey man, I had this huge hit in the early 2000s. I'm just super jaded. I'm not the expert at this. And I just am like, so you're mad at the industry that you haven't done anything in 10 years for? I was like, I mean, you think like
people are just kind of like, well, you know, I had this thing, and you know, occasionally I get emails. I've been playing for. It's just like, that's great. What have you done recently? Because it's just like what I've seen is people that do it well keep on learning, keep on doing the thing, even when some of the pieces aren't moving. They rethink, they retool. But they just adjust and they adapt. And
100%.
And you can have success in 2000. That's awesome
for sure.
But you got to keep on doing the work and realizing that things will change. You're right. You know, maybe Nashville, you know, you can make it a 4-year town. It could be a 3-year town. It's, you know, it could change based on different things like this, because as technology grows and music's allowing it to, I feel, be implemented, as you said, more efficiently. I agree. I think rights are becoming, when you do it online, and this, you eliminate a lot of things where, you wasted your time kind of driving there. It was creepy, or they didn't show up, and then you had to go back home. You were just like, oh God. But if you're doing it from your space,
right.
And it's wonderful. And what I love about this too is, like, you know, when someone I'm writing with, to be like, oh, I can build it out while we're talking. I don't have to be like, oh, you know, let me bring some of my stuff with me. I'll kind of set up a temporary thing and I'll do the rest later on.
Right.
You can do this all in real time, and the process gets streamlined even more.
Right. I mean, you're able to turn around and right there with what you're doing, be like, hold on, keep doing that, replay that, right? And then let me just build off of that. And if you went somewhere and met up with somebody and they didn't have that stuff, and then it's like, how much time is spent. And again, I'm not advocating for everybody should do it virtually. It's do what you feel best. But the upside of being able to do these things virtually, I think a lot of people that have, maybe found their community and feel comfortable with each other can do this. And hey, I got my wife and kids here, but we're on vacation, but I'm inspired and want to write virtually, and then jump out to the beach and have some beers and hang. Like, that's amazing to me. And so I think, I look at it as, whatever works best for you kind of thing. But the whole idea of I don't have anybody to write with is what I want to eliminate from anybody's concern or issue in songwriting, is I don't have anybody to write with. So yeah, that's a big upside that we're looking at.
Dude, that's awesome. And you've got some new features that you're getting ready to, like, what are the updates coming to the app?
Yeah. So we just released a pro tier. So think of it like most social media platforms that have the blue check mark. There's a vetting process that you have to go through. And this is brand new, and we're super excited about it. We already have probably 30 or so that have gone through and gotten verified and all that good stuff. It takes a while because we have a very limited team on our end as all the applications come through. But what happens is once a verified pro songwriter, they get that blue check mark, if you will. But in the settings, what you can do is kind of toggle between only seeing other verified pros or seeing everybody, right? And so it kind of gives that tiered model. And, a lot of the pros that we've talked to travel a lot. They are going from Nashville to LA to New York, and they're saying, hey, I want to find people at my level that maybe my publisher can't get in front of for whatever reason. And I want to set up rights while I'm out traveling. And so this will then make that a lot easier for pro levels. And so we haven't done a big, massive marketing push towards it. Still making sure that the process on the back end is really smooth, and we're pumped about it. I mean, for us, that gives one little step of going, hey, now that we have kind of this one tier, maybe there's another tier or two that we have coming down the road, but then it gives some sort of structure to it. I'm at this level. I'm not exactly a pro, but I can, how do we build kind of resources, tools, coaching, et cetera, to help you get to the pro tier, right? Or whatever that looks like. So there's some sort of next step, next level, if you will, just like they do in the minor leagues. And so we're super excited about that. We've been working on that for a long time. We pushed it off for 6 months because just like everything in the startup world, we want to make it as simple as possible. And there was a couple things that we thought this would make it a cooler experience, but it might be it would make it more difficult to use right away. And so I won't get into the details, but we were going to launch it in March, but there were things that we were like, it's got to be, you can't have to think about how to use it. Right. So we halted on that, which was frustrating, but also for good reason. The other thing that we just launched was QR codes. So in the setting, each user has their own QR code.
Oh, that's awesome.
Most social platforms have it, but this will then, again, this stuff's also new, but that way, if you meet somebody, say you and I meet in person, or you can even post it on any social, right? It's, hey, I'm looking for co-writers. If you scan this, you still have to do the double opt-in, but then you can read the other writers' profiles, check them out. Either it's a yes, no, or save for later. So you can now save profiles for a later date. Just that way you don't have to swipe immediately. Click save for later. It goes to the save for later list, and then you can check them out then. But the QR code's great because you and I can meet at a bar, meet in passing, and, hey, we should write some time. Yeah, man, scan my I don't want to necessarily, I would for you, because I know you're great, but give out your phone number or email, and have your personal information out there. And so this kind of alleviates, hell yeah, man, scan my QR code.
And such an efficient, almost like portfolio.
Right.
Instead of the business card where people were like, I remember getting business cards and I'm like, how many people are keeping these things and away and forgetting, and to just have this thing that's at your access where it's I can hear some of your songs too and see what you're done. Oh, that's even better. Let's do that.
And there's a lot of bigger writers here in Nashville that I've seen when we're just hanging out, and people come up and be like, hey man, good to see you. Dude, when can we write? And the bigger writers normally like, I don't know who this guy or girl is, to be honest with you, but I don't want to be mean. And they're trying to write with them. This kind of gives that a little bit of a filter to be like, oh man, just scan my QR code. I'll check out your stuff. And if it works out, then, and I like it, then like I'll swipe right and we can write, but it kind of alleviates that whole, like, I don't want to say no because I don't know who you are, but then they can really vet the other writer and see if they potentially would be a great co-write. So the QR code is just a kind of one of those things that we were going to do in the very beginning, but just we're like, you know what, let's get the core stuff out first and then added in these little things down the road. And then what's coming next are kind of really cool things that people have been asking for that have always just been in the roadmap, adding more than one co-writer into a group message. So that way it's, hey, you and I connected, let's add in a third or a fourth. We want to add in a calendar integration. So you and I then, just like Calendly, but just built in. It makes a ton of sense. And it's not going to be, I got to manage another calendar. It'll read off of your current calendar, just like Calendly does, and you could set it separate, but just that way it's, man, I don't want to have to go back and forth. When's Mike available? I can
You're really making this streamlined where it's just like, it's as simple as possible. And
you would get a notification because I would be able to see, because we're connected in the app. Mike's available 2 Thursdays from now in the afternoon. I click it. It sends you a pop-up that says, Kevin wants to write next Thursday. Click. It's on the calendar. And like, I don't have to text you, I don't have to call you. So that'll be a good one. And from that is what we get really excited, because even though it's a front-facing, user feature, like the back-end stuff is what we really want to help songwriters with, because what publishers and labels, they want to know who's working hard, right? Like who's a good hang, who's busting their butt. And from this, we can go, look, man, Mike's been writing 10 songs in 15 days. Like they're whether or not they're good or not, it's a data point that helps us promote songwriters.
They're all awesome.
They're killing. They're all great.
They're all great. They're all wonderful. But no, dude, it seems everything that you're adding on to is just listening to what people are like, oh, we'd like this too. So it's just like, that is so awesome to see that grow, because it seems you're really listening to what the audience needs and making sure that it's accessible, but it's also easy. Like, it's just like, this thing.
And then from the calendar, you and I get in a room, say we bring in a third, and then it's a quick integration of a split sheet of, hey, you guys are right that day. Mike, here's the song title. Here's your IPI numbers, because it pulls from the profile. And then you just are like, great. So then it's stored of, hey, what are my songs I wrote with Mike and Richard? And here, and it's all one click, man. It's like defaults if you want to splitting evenly. And that, that's pretty standard for Nashville, but I know in LA, New York, it can be different, but it obviously just needs equal 100. So you just put it in there. And that way there's there's the document, a split, eventually, way down the road, do we distribute or something? Maybe, I don't know. But it just is like, what are all the things that take time that you should do?
Yeah.
That just is another thing, but how do you make it so stupidly easy that just like, because it read off the calendar, and it doesn't have to be through the calendar, but just, hey, here's our group that we connected with, add song sheet. There it is. So split sheet will be another
that
big
is
one.
Awesome, especially a split sheet, because then that avoids someone being like, so split sheet. If it's already there, it's like
total sense.
Be like, here we go. And I love the default of just like, cool, 50. There we go.
Yeah.
That is so.
Yeah.
So if people are listening, they're like, okay, where do I sign up?
It's very simply, we should write sometime.com on Apple Store and Google Play. If you go to our website, you're like, this isn't a website. It's like more like a landing page, but I joke because I always say, have you ever been to Tinder or Bumble's website, for those that have ever used it? And they're like, no. And I'm like, same, because we want to get you to the app.
Yeah.
We'll eventually build out the website to look all pretty, but I'm like, the money's in the app, website, it's pretty simple, but we should write sometime.com on all the socials the same. So it's free, it's free
awesome.
too.
Dude, that's great. We're going to put a link in our site. Kevin, thanks for hanging out with me. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate everything you're doing. Keep killing it, man.
And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.